The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sullivan estate, casting golden rays across the Italian marble floors. Emma Sullivan stood in the expensive kitchen, carefully preparing breakfast as she did every morning. The smell of fresh coffee and warm croissants filled the air, but the beauty of the moment was lost on her. She had learned long ago that creating perfect moments meant nothing if no one noticed them. Richard Sullivan sat at the dining table, his eyes glued to his tablet, scrolling through stock reports and property listings. His designer suit was pressed to perfection, his dark hair styled impeccably, and his Rolex caught the light with every movement of his wrist. He was the picture of success, a self-made billionaire who had built his real estate empire from a single property flip to a portfolio worth over $3 billion. To the world, he was a genius. To Emma, he was a stranger who happened to live in the same house. She placed a plate of eggs Benedict in front of him, garnished exactly how he preferred. He did not look up. She poured his coffee, the rich aroma wafting between them. He continued scrolling. Emma stood there for a moment, waiting for any acknowledgement, any sign that he remembered she existed. Nothing came. Taking a seat across from him, Emma picked at her own breakfast without appetite. The silence stretched between them like an endless canyon. This was their normal. This had been their life for the past 3 years. She remembered when things were different, when Richard had pursued her with passion, when his eyes lit up at the sight of her. That man had disappeared the moment the wedding ring slid onto her finger. Richard finally spoke, his voice flat and businesslike. The charity gala is this Saturday at the Ocean View Grand Hotel. I need you there. Wear something appropriate. The Vanderbilt family will be attending, and I cannot afford any distractions. Emma felt the familiar sting of being reduced to an accessory. Something appropriate meant something that would not draw attention, something that would allow her to fade into the background while Richard networked and closed deals. She had played this role dozens of times, always the dutiful wife, always invisible. She opened her mouth to respond, but Richard was already standing, grabbing his briefcase and heading toward the door. His driver would be waiting. He paused at the threshold, not turning back to look at her. Do not be late. 7 o'clock sharp. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt like a slap. Emma sat alone in the vast dining room, surrounded by luxury that felt like a prison. The estate had 12 bedrooms, a home theater, an indoor pool, and grounds that stretched for acres. Yet she had never felt more confined. She was Mrs. Richard Sullivan, a title that came with everything except what she truly wanted, to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. The day passed slowly as it always did. Emma tried to occupy herself with reading, with tending to the garden, with anything that might distract her from the emptiness. But by afternoon, she found herself standing in front of a closet, staring at the row of dresses Richard had chosen for her over the years. They were all expensive, all elegant, all utterly devoid of personality. Navy blue, charcoal gray, modest black. Each one designed to help her disappear. She pulled out the black dress Richard would expect her to wear to the gala. It had long sleeves, a high neckline, and fell well below her knees. It was beautiful in its own way, but it was not her. Emma held the dress against her body and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, defeated, older than her 32 years. Something inside her cracked. A small voice whispered that this could not be her entire existence. She thought about the woman she used to be before Richard, the woman who wore bright colors and laughed freely, who danced without worrying about being proper. That woman had dreams. That woman had life in her eyes. Emma pulled out her phone and called the one person who had never stopped seeing her. Grace Park answered on the second ring, her voice bright with surprise. Emma, is everything okay? You never called during the day. Grace, I need your help. Emma's voice shook slightly. I need to remember who I am. There was a pause, then Grace's voice came back fierce with determination. Come to the boutique. Right now. We are going to fix this. 20 minutes later, Emma pulled up to Grace's boutique in downtown Beverly Hills. Grace Park had been her best friend since college, the one person who had warned her that Richard might not be the man he seemed. Grace owned an upscale fashion boutique that catered to women who wanted to make statements, not fade into wallpaper. The storefront gleamed with elegant displays of bold dresses and accessories. Grace met her at the door, pulling her into a tight hug. Talk to me. What happened? Everything. Nothing. I just realized I cannot do this anymore. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I cannot keep being invisible. The gala is Saturday, and I am supposed to wear another one of those horrible dresses that make me look like I am attending a funeral. I am so tired, Grace. I am so tired of not existing. Grace pulled back and looked at her with fierce love. Then we make you exist. We remind Richard exactly what he has been taking for granted. She led Emma into the boutique, past racks of stunning dresses, to a private section in the back. I have been saving something special. I knew someday you would be ready for it. She pulled out a dress that made Emma's breath catch. It was red, the color of wine and passion, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that would fall mid-thigh. It had a subtle shimmer to the fabric, elegant but daring. The neckline was a sweetheart cut that would show just enough to be sophisticated without being inappropriate. It was stunning. It was bold. It was everything Emma had not allowed herself to be in years. Grace, I cannot wear this. Richard would never approve. Emma touched the fabric with trembling fingers. Grace's eyes flashed. That is exactly why you should wear it. Emma, when was the last time you did something for yourself? When was the last time Richard actually looked at you, really looked at you? You have spent 3 years making yourself smaller and smaller, and for what? Has he noticed? Has he cared? The words hit Emma like cold water. Grace was right. All her efforts to be the perfect wife had earned her nothing but loneliness. She had sacrificed her identity for a marriage that existed only on paper. I will take it. The words came out stronger than Emma expected. She met Grace's eyes with new determination. I will wear it to the gala. Grace smiled, the kind of smile that promised revolution. That is my girl. Now, we have work to do. Hair, makeup, shoes, everything. You are going to walk into that gala and remind everyone, especially your husband, that you are not just Mrs. Richard Sullivan. You are Emma, and you are unforgettable. Over the next few days, Emma prepared in secret. She worked with Grace on every detail, getting her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face, practicing walking in heels that gave her confidence, selecting jewelry that sparkled without being ostentatious. She felt like a woman preparing for battle, and in a way, she was. This was a fight for recognition, for respect, for her right to exist fully. Richard noticed none of it. He came home late each night, ate dinner in his office while on conference calls, and fell asleep without a word to her. Emma watched him with new eyes, seeing clearly for the first time how little space she occupied in his world. The realization hurt, but it also freed her. She had nothing left to lose. Saturday arrived with brilliant sunshine. Emma spent the day at the spa with Grace, being pampered and prepared. As the stylist worked on her hair and the makeup artist enhanced her features, Emma felt herself transforming. Not into someone new, but back into who she had always been underneath the layers of suppression. By the time she returned to the estate, Richard had already left for an afternoon meeting. He had texted her a reminder to be ready by 6:30. No questions about her day, no interest in her preparations. Just instructions. Emma stood in her bedroom, the red dress hanging before her like a promise. She slipped it on, and the fabric hugged her curves in ways that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The woman in the mirror was radiant, powerful, alive. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, her makeup highlighted her features without hiding them, and the dress made her feel like she could conquer the world. She heard Richard's car pull into the driveway at 6:15. Emma took a deep breath, slipped on her heels, and prepared to walk downstairs. Her heart pounded in her chest, but it was not from fear. It was from the thrill of finally, after years of silence, making herself heard. The moment had arrived. Emma Sullivan was about to remind her husband and everyone else exactly who she was. And nothing would ever be the same again. Emma descended the grand staircase slowly, each step deliberate and measured. The click of her heels on the marble echoed through the vast foyer like a countdown. Richard stood near the entrance, checking his watch with an impatient expression, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked instructions to someone about quarterly projections. He wore a custom-tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, looking every bit the powerful mogul he had become. He glanced up absently as she approached, ready to usher her out the door without really seeing her. Then his eyes focused, and the phone slipped slightly in his grasp. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The confident, always in control Richard Sullivan stood frozen, staring at his wife as though seeing a ghost. Emma reached the bottom step and stood before him, her posture straight, her head held high. She watched the shock ripple across his face, followed quickly by something else. Confusion, perhaps even anger. What are you wearing? His voice came out rough, strained. A dress. Emma kept her tone light, almost casual. For the gala. Is there a problem? Richard's jaw tightened. That is not appropriate. Go upstairs and change into something more suitable. We are already running late. For the first time in 3 years, Emma did not move to obey. She met his gaze steadily, a small smile playing at her lips. I think it is perfectly suitable. Shall we go? The air between them crackled with tension. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice to the commanding tone he used in boardrooms. Emma, I am not asking. That dress is too revealing, too attention-seeking. You know how these events work. I need to focus on business, not worry about you causing a scene. Each word felt like he was trying to push her back into the box where he kept her. But Emma had already broken free, and she had no intention of climbing back in. Then perhaps you should go alone. I will stay here. She turned as if to go back upstairs. Richard's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. His eyes flashed with something she had not seen in years. Real emotion, raw and unfiltered. You are my wife. You will attend this gala with me. But you will go upstairs right now and change into something that does not make you look like you are trying to attract every man in the room. Emma pulled her wrist free with surprising strength. If you are so worried about other men looking at me, perhaps you should have tried looking at me yourself sometime in the past 3 years. She walked past him toward the door. The car is waiting. Are you coming or not? The drive to the Ocean View Grand Hotel was suffocating. Richard gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had dismissed the driver, clearly wanting privacy to continue the argument. But Emma stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, refusing to engage. Let him stew in his anger. She had spent years drowning in silence. You are doing this to embarrass me. Richard finally broke the silence, his voice tight with belly-controlled fury. You know the Vanderbilts will be there. You know I am finalizing the deal for the Manhattan properties. And you choose tonight, of all nights, to have some kind of midlife crisis. Emma turned to look at him, really look at him. His handsome face was twisted with frustration, but underneath she could see something else. Fear. He was afraid of losing control, of the narrative slipping from his grasp. This is not about you, Richard. Shocking as that may be to hear. This is about me finally remembering I exist. They pulled up to the hotel entrance where valets waited and photographers lined the red carpet. The Ocean View Grand was the premier venue in the city, a glittering palace of glass and gold that overlooked the Pacific. Tonight it was lit up like a jewel, with luxury cars depositing the city's elite at its doorstep. Richard got out first, handing his keys to the valet. He came around to open Emma's door, and she could see him trying to compose himself, to put on the public face he wore so well. But when she stepped out, the flash of cameras exploded around them. Photographers who normally focused exclusively on Richard suddenly turned their lenses on Emma. The red dress caught the light, shimmering like fire. Her confidence radiated in ways that no amount of expensive jewelry could replicate. She was magnetic, and everyone noticed. Mr. Sullivan, who is your stunning date tonight? One photographer called out, not recognizing her as his wife. Richard's jaw clenched so hard Emma thought she heard his teeth crack. My wife, Emma. He said the words like they were coated in acid. Inside the ballroom, the transformation was complete. The room was a fantasy of crystal chandeliers, white orchids, and champagne fountains. 500 of the city's wealthiest and most influential people mingled in designer clothes and practiced smiles. Usually, Emma would slip into this environment like a shadow, noticed by no one. Tonight, heads turned as she entered. Richard placed a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with more force than necessary. He stopped to greet business associates, trying to steer conversations toward deals and developments. But for the first time, people were more interested in talking to Emma. Mrs. Sullivan, you look absolutely radiant tonight. Catherine Vanderbilt, matriarch of New York's most prestigious real estate family, appeared beside them with a knowing smile. That dress is exquisite. Where did you find it? A small boutique owned by a dear friend. Emma smiled genuinely, feeling a rush of pleasure at being seen. Grace Park Designs in Beverly Hills. I will have to visit. Catherine's eyes sparkled with approval before she turned to Richard. Your wife is a treasure, Mr. Sullivan. I hope you know how fortunate you are. Richard's smile was plastic. I am reminded daily. But his eyes told a different story. They burned with barely suppressed anger. As Catherine moved away, Richard leaned close to Emma's ear. Stop making a spectacle of yourself. These people are here for business, not to admire your dress. Emma pulled away slightly, her smile never wavering. Then go do your business. I will be fine on my own. She walked away before he could respond, feeling his stare burning into her back. For the first time in years, Emma circulated through a social event without hiding behind Richard's shadow. She spoke with people genuinely, laughed freely, and discovered that when she allowed herself to shine, people responded. James Mitchell appeared at her side as she accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. James was a venture capitalist in his early 40s, handsome in a relaxed way that contrasted sharply with Richard's rigid intensity. He had kind eyes and an easy smile. Emma Sullivan. I have attended a dozen of these events, and I swear I have never seen you before tonight. How is that possible? Perhaps you were not looking in the right places. Emma surprised herself with the flirtatious edge to her voice. James laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Or perhaps you were not standing in a place where people could see you. That dress makes it impossible to look anywhere else. They talked easily, discovering shared interests in art and literature that Emma had long suppressed to avoid annoying Richard with topics he considered frivolous. James was attentive, asking questions and actually listening to her answers. It was intoxicating to be heard. Across the room, Richard watched the interaction with growing rage. He tried to focus on his conversation with the Vanderbilt attorneys, but his eyes kept drifting back to his wife. The way she laughed at something James said. The way she touched his arm lightly during conversation. The way other men watched her with undisguised appreciation. Jealousy consumed him like poison. He had never felt anything like this. In business, Richard controlled everything. He manipulated markets, influenced politicians, and bent competitors to his will. But standing in this ballroom, watching his wife be admired by other men, he was powerless. And he hated it. When the orchestra began playing, James extended his hand to Emma. May I have this dance? Emma hesitated only a moment before accepting. They moved to the dance floor, and Richard watched as James placed his hand on Emma's waist, holding her closer than strictly necessary. They moved together smoothly, Emma's red dress swirling with each turn. Richard abandoned his business conversation mid-sentence and crossed the ballroom in long strides. He reached the dancing couple and tapped James firmly on the shoulder. Cutting in. James raised an eyebrow but stepped back graciously. Of course. Thank you for the dance, Emma. He disappeared into the crowd. Richard pulled Emma against him roughly, his hand gripping her waist with possessive force. What do you think you are doing? Dancing. Is that not allowed? Emma met his eyes without flinching. You are my wife. You do not dance with other men. You do not flirt. You do not embarrass me like this. Emma felt anger surge through her, hot and cleansing. Embarrass you? I have spent 3 years making myself invisible so I would not embarrass you. I have worn dresses you chose, attended events I hated, and sat silently while you ignored me completely. And the one night I decide to actually exist, you accuse me of embarrassing you. People were starting to notice their tense exchange. Richard forced his expression into something resembling calm, but his grip on her waist remained punishing. We are leaving. Now. He practically dragged her off the dance floor, ignoring the curious stares that followed them. Emma stumbled slightly in her heels but refused to let him see her falter. They reached the entrance, and Richard barked at the valet to bring his car immediately. The drive home was a nightmare of silent fury. Richard's hands strangled the steering wheel, his breathing heavy and labored. Emma stayed straight ahead, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. She had crossed the line tonight, and there was no going back. When they reached the estate, Richard slammed the car door so hard Emma thought the glass might shatter. He stormed into the house, and she followed, her heels clicking steadily behind him. In the foyer, he finally exploded. You humiliated me tonight. In front of the Vanderbilts, in front of my business partners, in front of everyone who matters. You made yourself look cheap and made me look like a fool who cannot control his own wife. Emma felt something inside her snap completely. Control me. Is that what you think marriage is? Control. She kicked off her heels, suddenly tired of the physical pain even if the shoes had been part of her armor. I am not a business asset you can manage, Richard. I am a person. A person you have ignored and dismissed and treated like furniture for 3 years. I gave you everything. Richard's voice rose to a shout. This house, this life, everything you could possibly want. Everything except the one thing I actually needed. Emma's voice broke slightly. Love, Richard. Attention. To be seen as more than just a prop in your perfect life. Do you even know who I am? Do you know my favorite book? My favorite color? What I dream about when I lie awake at night in our bed while you sleep in your office? Richard opened his mouth but no words came. The realization crashed over him like a wave. He did not know any of those things. He had not thought to ask. Emma saw the recognition in his eyes and felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. 3 years, Richard. 3 years I have been invisible in my own marriage. And tonight, for just a few hours, I let myself be seen. I let myself remember what it feels like to exist. And you cannot stand it because for once, the attention was not on you. She turned toward the staircase, exhausted suddenly. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Where are you going? Richard's voice had lost its commanding edge. To bed. I am tired of fighting for scraps of recognition from someone who should love me. Emma climbed the stairs without looking back, leaving Richard standing alone in the foyer of the enormous, empty house. And for the first time since building his empire, Richard Sullivan felt like he had lost something truly valuable. Emma woke the next morning to an empty bed, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the silence. Normally, she could hear Richard on conference calls in his office or barking orders to his assistant. Today, the house felt hollow, abandoned. She showered and dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, clothes she rarely wore because Richard preferred her to always look polished and put together. But she was done living for Richard's preferences. She was done with a lot of things. Downstairs, she found the kitchen empty. No coffee brewing, no breakfast prepared. Just a note on the marble counter in Richard's sharp handwriting, had to go to the office. We will talk tonight. Emma crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. She made herself coffee and toast, then called Grace. How did it go? Grace answered immediately, her voice eager. Exactly as dramatic as you would expect. Emma settled onto the couch in the sunroom, cradling her coffee. He was furious. Accused me of embarrassing him, of making him look like a fool. We had a massive fight when we got home. Good. Grace's response was fierce. It is about time he felt something other than smug satisfaction. What are you going to do now? Emma looked out at the perfectly manicured gardens, the pool that sparkled in the morning sun, the tennis courts she never used. All of it beautiful, all of it meaningless. I do not know. But I cannot keep living like this, Grace. Last night proved that. I cannot go back to being invisible. Then do not. You can stay with me for as long as you need. My guest room is yours. Grace paused. Emma, you deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who sees you, who values you. If Richard cannot be that person, then you need to have the courage to walk away. The words hung in the air, terrifying and liberating at the same time. Walk away from her marriage. Walk away from the security, the lifestyle, the identity of being Mrs. Richard Sullivan. Could she really do that? Let me think about it. Emma finished her coffee. I will call you later. The day passed in strange limbo. Emma wandered through the massive house, seeing it with new eyes. Every room was decorated with expensive art and furniture, but none of it reflected her taste or personality. It was all Richard's choices, Richard's vision. She was just a guest in someone else's life. She found herself in Richard's office, a room she rarely entered. His desk was cluttered with contracts and financial reports. Framed photos lined the walls, chronicling his rise from modest beginnings to billionaire status. There were pictures of him closing major deals, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities, accepting awards. Not a single photo of their wedding day. Not one picture of the two of them together. Emma felt the final piece of her heart that still clung to hope shatter. She left the office and went upstairs to pack a bag. Richard arrived home at 7, earlier than usual. He found Emma in the bedroom, a suitcase open on the bed half filled with clothes. "What are you doing?" His voice was tight, controlled. Emma did not stop packing. "What does it look like?" "I am leaving." Richard crossed the room in 3 strides, closing the suitcase. "You are not going anywhere. We are going to sit down and talk about this like adults." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Like adults? You mean like you will talk at me and I will sit silently and accept whatever you decide?" "No, Richard. I am done with that dynamic." She reopened the suitcase and continued packing. Richard grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. His eyes were desperate in a way she had never seen. "Emma, please. Just stop for a minute and listen to me." She pulled her wrist free but stopped packing. Turning to face him fully, she crossed her arms. "Fine. Talk." Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she recognized. "I know I have not been the husband you needed. I know I got caught up in work, in building the business, and I neglected you. But walking out is not the answer. We can fix this." "How?" Emma's voice was dangerously quiet. "How exactly do we fix 3 years of you treating me like I am invisible? How do we fix the fact that you do not know anything about who I am as a person? How do we fix that your office has no pictures of us together because I do not actually matter in your life?" "That is not true." Richard's protest sounded weak even to his own ears. "Is it not?" Emma felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "Name my favorite book." Silence. "My favorite color." More silence. "The last movie we watched together." "The last real conversation we had that was not about your business." "One dream I have mentioned wanting to pursue." Richard stood frozen, his face pale. He could not answer a single question. "You cannot." Emma's voice broke. "Because you have never asked. You have never cared enough to ask. I am just the wife-shaped accessory you keep around for social appearances." She turned back to her packing, folding a sweater with shaking hands. Richard watched her, panic rising in his chest. For the first time in his carefully controlled life, he was facing a problem he could not solve with money or power. "Tell me now." His voice came out hoarse. "Tell me all those things. I want to know." Emma stopped, her hands resting on the suitcase. She looked at him with eyes full of exhausted sadness. "It does not work like that, Richard. You do not get to suddenly care just because I'm leaving. Real interest, real love, it builds over time through 1,000 small moments of attention. You cannot make up for 3 years of neglect with one conversation." "I can try." Richard moved closer, his voice pleading. "Emma, I know I have been a terrible husband. I got so focused on proving myself, on building something that mattered, that I forgot the most important thing already mattered. You. I forgot about you, and that is unforgivable. But please, give me a chance to do better." Emma wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that still remembered falling in love with his ambition and charm, wanted to accept his words. But she had learned the hard way that Richard's words and his actions rarely aligned. "Actions, Richard. Not words." She zipped the suitcase closed. "If you really want to change, then show me. But I cannot stay here while you figure it out. I cannot keep sacrificing my sense of self while you maybe, possibly, someday learn to see me." She lifted the suitcase off the bed. Richard stepped in front of the door, blocking her path. His eyes were red, and she realized with shock that he was holding back tears. "Please do not go." His voice cracked. "I cannot lose you. Then you should have held on to me when you had me." Emma's own tears finally fell. "You should have loved me when I was here, begging for your attention. You should have seen me, Richard. Just once, you should have really seen me." She moved past him, and this time he did not try to stop her. Emma walked down the grand staircase one last time, her heels echoing through the foyer just as they had the night before. But this time, she was not walking toward a confrontation. She was walking toward freedom. Richard followed her down, watching helplessly as she loaded her suitcase into her car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful, but all Richard felt was emptiness. Emma paused before getting in the car. She looked back at the mansion, at the life she was leaving behind, and then at the man standing in the doorway. I am staying with Grace. If you want to reach me, you can. But Richard, I need you to understand something. I am not doing this to punish you or to manipulate you into changing. I am doing this because I finally love myself enough to not accept being invisible anymore. She drove away, and Richard stood watching until her taillights disappeared down the long driveway. Then he went back inside and sat on the stairs in the foyer, the same spot where he had watched her descend in that red dress less than 24 hours ago. The house was silent. Completely, utterly silent. And Richard realized with devastating clarity that it had always been this silent. He had just never noticed before because Emma had been suffering that silence alone. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Richard's life. He tried to work, but for the first time ever, business held no appeal. Numbers on spreadsheets meant nothing. Meetings felt pointless. His assistant asked 3 times if he was feeling ill. He called Emma repeatedly, but she rarely answered. When she did, their conversations were brief and painful. She was staying with Grace, working on herself, figuring out what she wanted from life. She sounded lighter, happier even, and that hurt more than anything. Richard tried the old playbook first. He sent flowers, jewelry. He had his assistant book a trip to Paris, Emma's dream destination that he had never bothered to take her to. She returned everything with polite notes that broke his heart. He showed up at Grace's boutique one afternoon, disheveled and desperate. Grace met him at the door with crossed arms and a fierce glare. She does not want to see you. I need to talk to her. Please, Grace. Just 5 minutes. Grace studied him for a long moment. You know what I told Emma when she first started dating you? I told her you were the kind of man who would always love his empire more than his wife. I told her to be careful. And she did not listen because she saw something in you that she thought was worth loving. Do you have any idea how much it destroys me to know I was right? The words hit Richard like physical blows. I can change. I am trying to change. Grace's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Then change for yourself, not for her. Change because you realize you have been living a half-life, not because you want to win back your wife like she is some kind of business deal. Emma is not a prize to be won, Richard. She is a person who deserves genuine love and respect. If you cannot give her that, truly and consistently, then leave her alone to find someone who can. She closed the door in his face, and Richard stood on the sidewalk feeling more lost than he had ever felt in his life. That night, alone in the massive empty house, Richard did something he had not done since he was a teenager. He cried. Real, body-shaking sobs that tore from somewhere deep inside. He cried for the woman he had taken for granted. He cried for the years he had wasted. He cried for the man he had become, so focused on external success that he had neglected the one thing that truly mattered. When the tears finally stopped, something shifted inside him. He was not crying to manipulate or to gain sympathy. He was crying because he genuinely understood what he had lost. And he knew that if he wanted any chance of winning Emma back, he had to become a different person entirely. The next morning, Richard did something unprecedented. He called his assistant and told her to clear his schedule for the next month. All of it. The investors would be furious. The board would panic. He did not care. He started therapy, something he had always mocked as weakness. Dr. Patricia Hayes did not coddle him. She made him confront ugly truths about himself, about his need for control, about his fear of vulnerability. It was brutal and necessary. He volunteered at a homeless shelter, working alongside people who had nothing but still found ways to connect and care for each other. He read books Emma had mentioned years ago that he had dismissed as frivolous. He learned to cook because she had always loved cooking, but he had never once joined her in the kitchen.